between April and May, just when the vegetation begins its vigorous growth. Every Balkan home takes part in a sacrifice. The first lamb for the year is shared between peoples, ethnicities, and religions in one unifying meal. This is the day when all quarrels must end, when the summer arrives. This is the day of St. George. The Day of St. George is known by many names across the Balkans. Gergjovden, Agios Georgios, Đurđevdan, Hederles, or even Ederlezi. But it's the same celebration all over the place, centered around the sacrifice of a lamb. The date falls either on the 23rd of April or on the 6th of May, depending on which calendar is used. But, as I said, the celebrations are similar, if not even the same. Naturally, this celebration is linked with Saint George, the Christian saint who is depicted as a soldier and who was believed to have been a soldier in the Roman army. In more recent times, this has led many of the Balkan countries, and not only on the Balkans, to celebrate his day as a day of the army and of bravery. But in folklore, this is a time that is rather connected with the beginning of the agricultural year. The name George, which comes from the Greek Georgios, literally means farmer. So, in folk belief, he is considered a patron saint to everyone who is dealing with farm stuff, and especially those who are sheep breeders and who are dedicated to looking after sheep. This is also the time when, in the past, contracts were made, workers were hired or were let go. And this was also the time when the sheep went to their pastures. I don't know if you know this, but the region of the Balkans has been a place for breeding sheep for as long as we have historical records. The region, the ancient region of Thrace, was referred by ancient authors as mother of sheep, and the flocks of sheep here were numerous. This was a tradition that was held up until recently, up until the beginning of the 20th century, and that ended in the mid to late 20th century. In Balkan folk belief, the year is separated by two main celebrations: the Day of St. George, which is considered the beginning of summer, and the Day of Saint Demetrius, which falls in October and is considered the beginning of winter. In the past, this celebration began just after dawn, when people went to the fields and forests to gather different herbs and plants for ritual purposes. Now, nowadays, this tradition still holds true, and many people would adorn their houses, or at least their doors, with some greenery. Of course, plants differ in different Balkan regions and even in specific regions within each country, but willow and nettle are the plants that appear almost everywhere. In Bulgaria, we also have specific flowering plants that are specifically important for this day, as for instance the lily of the valley and some other plants. Generally, every plant that is in bloom during this period is considered connected with the celebration. The plants gathered were used not only to adorn the doors of the houses or the gates where the sheep were held, but also they were used to make wreaths for the sacrificial animals and to decorate people themselves. Nowadays, this tradition survives in many places, and in others it has been reconstructed quite successfully. The symbolism behind this is quite evident. People are not only gathering the greenery, the growth of nature to adorn their houses, but are also welcoming this renewal in their own homes. They're blessing their homes with this renewed energy of nature and are marking their homes as a place of life, growth, and prosperity. But with herbs come also the witches. People believe that the dew on St. George's Day is very special and they would gather it, bathe in it, and of course do their magic spells. It is actually the dew that is considered the element that holds the fertility of the fields. And when witches would go during the night, in order to go first before the people of the village went, they would gather the dew that has fallen on the yards of their neighbors, and they would take this water to their own fields in order to transfer the fertility. This magical property of the dew makes it a very sought after water early in the morning of St. George's Day, and people would wash their face, at least their hands, and some would go to great lengths and even wash their whole bodies by rolling in the yards. It is believed that this would bring health, beauty, fertility, and most of all protection from this very, very powerful saint. The sacrifice of the lamb plays a central role in the celebrations of St. George's Day. Of course, nowadays most people would just go to the store and buy some lamb pre-packed for them. But in the past and in the rural areas still, people would make a real sacrifice of their own flock for this day. The sacrificial meal, because in books people often emphasize on the sacrifice itself, but the sacrificial meal is just as important as the sacrifice itself. Now, here we see something that's very important, and I hope that I make it clear enough so that you understand. Killing an animal is not done in order to kill the animal. Killing the animal in a ritual sacrifice is made in order to sustain life. And this is the most important thing in folk belief, sustaining life, going forward. And the animal that gives itself, its life, so that ours will continue, is treated with the utmost respect. Every part of the sacrificial animal is either preserved for magical purposes or eaten or disposed of in a very respectful way. And for those of you who are not from the Balkans, I have to underline this, that on the Balkans we eat all parts of the animal. We don't throw away the intestines, we don't throw away the lungs, we eat every part of that animal that gave its life so that ours may continue. And this is an important thing to remember as we continue to speak about animal sacrifices on the Balkans. And it has to be said that sharing this meal, sharing this very special meal, is something that brings the community together. Regardless whether this community is a family, only one family, whether it's a whole village, whether it is like a group of friends, when we sit together and eat together, sharing the same food, this establishes trust and it establishes the community itself. So, the sacrificial animal on the day of St. George plays this very special role. And it is quite telling that across the Balkans, this is one of the few celebrations that is shared between peoples, ethnicities, religions. Everyone shares this meal. Nowadays, just like in the past, just like in antiquity, actually, people would gather in sacred places or even in churchyards, and they would have this meal together as a community. In the past, it was believed this is the time when everyone should settle their quarrels, they should mend their ways and be okay with everybody. And this ensured that in the upcoming year, with all the hard work and all the struggles that were coming during the agricultural year, people would get along fine and they would be able to sustain the community. The sacrificial animal is respected for the fact that it gave its life so that the community could thrive. We briefly mentioned that the Day of St. George is also popular among witches. In folk belief, every celebration that marks some type of a limit, and to be honest, many of them do, is considered quite potent for doing magic, whether it's good magic, magic for good, or magic for something bad. And Day of St. George is just that. It is the day when it is believed that summer begins to roll out towards us. The sun begins to roll towards summer. This is linked also with the natural movement of the sun across the sky. So this limit between winter and summer is a perfect time for the witches to do their magic. And witches were very fond of this day because this is actually the first day of the year that is considered a very potent time for gathering herbs, because obviously there were no herbs before that. And many of the herbs that are gathered on St. George's Day are not available during other times of the year. So every witch that wanted to fill their stash had to be very active throughout the night before St. George's Day. The night being another liminal element. The witches go through the night because they don't want to be recognized, they don't want to be seen, but also because the night is considered a magical time. Now, the most famous activity for the Day of St. George is gathering the fertility of the fields. And this is something that we'll see not only on the Balkans, but also throughout whole Europe and even probably in other places. And this was done by either gathering the dew that has fallen on the fields of the witches' neighbors, or by making a cross across those same fields and marking something or saying something in order to cross it, in order to take it by going around it. But fertility can be taken not only from the crops, but also from your cows or especially from your sheep. And numerous protective rights existed so that this did not happen. I'm not sure how much in our modern days it is applicable to speak about protecting your sheep, but something that people still do today is gather some greenery, adorn your homes, put some flowers on your table in order to invite spring or summer, and enjoy a nice meal with your own community. And if all this has made you curious for more, I offer extended cuts of my videos on my Patreon for tiers Stupan and above. Regardless whether you gather some greenery for the day of St. George or not, remember, keep the magic alive.